When I was 17 years old, my mum died of breast cancer. It was a pretty traumatic experience. It was difficult for me. My mum was my biggest cheerleader and my biggest supporter. She did so much for me in my life, made such a difference to the person that I am now. She gave me the love and the time and affection. I sometimes think of it like Harry Potter, the love spell that Harry's mum put on her. Throughout my life, I feel sure that I've been blessed and protected by the love that my mum showed me when I was little. It's been a long time, I'm 41 years old as we speak. Sometimes a day or two, sometimes longer, maybe once, twice a year. I get certain trauma feelings of vulnerability. There's times where I'll be just doing something mundane like cooking breakfast or in a supermarket, or just as I am now, pulled over in a car, and I'll have a slight thought or a feeling, and I will feel like I'm back at being sort of 16, 17 and feeling the fear of death, the fear of loss. So some of the interviews that you're going to hear from the members of Mindfulness are some of the guys that have been through similar experiences to me. We'd never met and spoken about this before. I'd set a message thread up on a WhatsApp group and just said, look, I'm looking to make a podcast. I want to share stories about what it's like to be a man and lose your mum. And I wasn't sure if anyone would come back, and as it happened, a few guys did. They've never spoken to each other about this topic before. We sit down and we have some very similar things. Motto of the group Mindfulness is don't man up, speak up. Trying to end the stigma and the stereotype that men are these people that have to be strong and keep it inside, man up. We're really trying to transcend that into men having feelings, being able to articulate them without worry of being judged or criticised or typecast. All of us guys lost our mums at different points of our lives, but we all experience this feeling of needing to man up, needing to step our games up. And so it's said in a few different ways, sometimes literally, but I found that really moving and almost sort of sad that theme came up. It helped me a lot to do the show, because it made me realise fully that I'm not alone, and that when I have these moments of feeling vulnerable or past trauma revisiting, that there's lots of guys going through this out there, and hopefully that's what can come through the show. I edited myself out because I was asking the same questions and it wouldn't make sense for me to be part of the show in that sense. So that's why my sort of contribution has become at the beginning. What you're going to hear now is all the answers to the questions that I asked the men that take part in this show. And I began by asking them to describe when they first realised that something was not okay, when they first became aware that possibly the mum was ill, or that there was even an idea that they might lose them at some point.
I was sort of like mid to early 20s, and I got a phone call from my mum. I was in London for the day, and she asked me to come round and sit and see her, and she had something she wanted to show me, and it turned out what she wanted me to do was feel a lump in her breast.
I know for certain it was an initial breast cancer diagnosis. I can't exactly be sure. I think I'm maybe possibly around 11, 12, living with a parent with cancer. The hospital trips, and I think there were multiple times where we were told sort of, 3 months and this is it.
The doctor saying, look, she's not going to wake up. We said 72 hours was the turning point. It's now, 96 hours later, and she's still not moving. The machines are breathing. She's on pain relief. She's on this, that, and the other. And to be honest, it's probably one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make in my life. And my dad just looked at me and said, what do we do? It'll probably be 24 hours and then she'll be gone.
And then she died this year. It was very unexpected, to say the least. Very unexpected. Like, here we are, and I think about her every day.
I almost shot it away as a thing. I feel a bit embarrassed to say, but like, sort of remember like playing football with friends, and then it being like getting dropped off, and then saying like bye to mum, saying it off, and not telling friends sort of like, oh, she's off to go get chemotherapy right now, away from what reality was. This is my life here, and as little as I can let home affect school and vice versa, the best I could do. You know, at like 14, 15, you don't want to be different from everyone. You want to fit into the group. You want to be one of the group. You don't want to be the kid with the sick mum.
I asked all the guys to tell me what made their mum great. What were the particular things that they got from her? What were the special memories they had? What were the happy times, the things that stood out, the fondest memories, and the things that will live on?
There's a lot that my mum has taught me in my life, directly and indirectly. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. My mum didn't have a sword, she had an axe. You know, that axe was, you know, she was going to troop her on. You know, when she had cancer, she didn't sit there and whinge and moan and play the pity card, or she carried on cooking dinners, she carried on going to the shops. And I think that's the one thing that my mum has taught me, resilience is key.
I would tell her all my sort of like deepest, darkest secrets, you know, all my little things, you know, my sort of worries and things. And then she would get drunk and she would tell everyone what I told her, which was wonderful. You know, she'd go, oh, by the way, he's doing this and he's got that. And I'm like, shut up, I've told you that in confidence, you know. And she was like, oh, right, okay. So it was sometimes a love-hate relationship with her, but she didn't get drunk very often, but it was funny when she got drunk, she used to tell everyone what I'd been talking to her about.
But such a loving person. She's like, I've got 4 sisters, so, you know, she had hands full looking after us and looking after the sort of like tribe of animals that we had. Hearing stories of her travelling around Australia and being caught on candid camera, and then asking for it not to be released, only for it to be released in the UK, and family members go, hang on, she looks familiar, just thinking that absolutely brilliant. And they're like, those memories of things that I wasn't around for become sort of the things that have lasted with me more than the actual memories that I was there for.
I will be eternally grateful to her, and I'm the person I am today because of her.
I still see my mum's face wherever I go. I still, you know, have that in my head. That's never going to change. And I see her from before she was ill, when she was this sort of funny woman. I still have all the pictures from my childhood and stuff like that. But my mum had this kind of bullshit filter, you know, so that if you ever sort of said anything that wasn't quite right, she'd just sit there and you just get this look. This obviously not going to come across well on the podcast, but you just get this knowing look of might want to rethink what you just said kind of look.
I wanted to know how men were affected by losing their mums. What was it particularly that they lost, and what was it that they lost that was more than mum? And we had some interesting answers and, interestingly, some very similar experiences.
Something switched. I lost my mum. I didn't have barely any time off from that. Sort of remember coming back in like 3 days later, and it ramped up in terms of, I guess maybe I just looking back and threw myself into something else as a distraction. If I go, you know, I've got to try my hardest at this, I don't have to think about anything else. You know, it worked because I ended up going to university and loving what I did. But you know, it's not the ideal way to go about it. But again, that's probably another example of sort of just building a wall up around me to distract and sort of deflect any sort of openness, I guess.
My brother cried, but I had to support up and stand him up. My uncle, who also carried the covering, cried, and it was kind of like I had to put my arms around him and say, you know, everything's going to be all right. So it felt not so much pressured, more I had to do it.
I did think to myself, you know, right, that part of me kind of has to be locked away now, has to go. So yeah, I did. I lost my kind of almost my ability to speak from my heart. It's weird, you know, you almost grow up. You almost sort of like have to grow up because she's not there to help you through your journey anymore. And you've then got to be that man of the house kind of thing.
I can still hear her voice every day. Like, it's bizarre, so I think about something in my head and then I can literally hear her voice replying to me and telling me either not to be such an idiot or to book my ideas up or how proud of me she is, or look, do you know what I mean, you've got this, just carry on, one day at a time, you've got this.
I asked all of the guys to talk about that special mother-son relationship and how the loss of that had affected them over the years.
20 years later, I still miss her. And there's not a day goes by when I don't think, God, I could do with mum now, you know, just to chuck something at her. And I think to an extent, you know, us sons use our mothers almost like a counsellor.
I found it really tough, because I built such a wall of that is that, this is this, that even when I had a friend going through sort of very similar thing, I couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to sort of have that conversation with them. I guess looking back now, obviously being a lot more mature, that, you know, we can have those conversations and can be a bit more deeper about things. But yeah, certainly back then there's a real wall that was put up.
I think especially men maybe have this misconception that they shouldn't talk about things like that. They shouldn't talk about the feelings and what's going on because they're men at the end of the day. But then, so if you don't talk about your feelings and what's going on, then what happens to them? You end up bottling them up. And then it makes you feel worse. Although at the time, obviously, that's the last thing that's going through your head, isn't it? You're thinking, God, I just want to run away from this. You know what I mean? If I don't think about it and I don't acknowledge it, then it's, for me personally, then it's not happened. But it has happened.
You know, and recently I had my big kind of, I don't know if it's a breakdown or if it's just a point where everything just got too much and I had no one to go to. But I spoke to one of the guys at Memphis, and the most amazing words. I've said this, and I'm quite open about, you know, struggling at the moment, and I'm quite open with other people about struggling, and you know, trying to help other people. And I think, you know, talking about it and getting messages like this across are the most important things we can do. And you know, Matty from Memphis just amazingly went, "I've got you. You know, I've got you." It was like an epiphany, you know, big moment. But just to hear those words and to know, you know, that you've got that kind of support behind you is life-saving.
I asked all of the guys what their one piece of advice would be for other men that might listen to this show, or for men that might have to go through the process that we've gone through. And this is what they said.
If you need to talk to somebody or somebody to listen, just reach out. Don't shy away from it or anything like that. She was your mum, and there'll be other people out there that have gone through similar situations that can give you advice, or even just be an ear to listen to. Even if you just want to talk for an hour about all the good things that's happened and all the memories, and yeah, don't be afraid to show emotions.
I know for a fact she wouldn't want it to be a label on me, so I'm not going to let it become a label on me. It's going to, you know, it's a point in life that happened, and it is important to sort of own that it happened. And again, that's sort of a process I'm still going through, sort of bringing down those walls. And I'm sure it will happen. Yeah, just owning it's happened, but not letting it define you.
That's where places like Memphis come in really, really important, because you do have a place to go where you can talk as a guy. And once that starts to come out, once we can start to talk about it again, then I think we get that bit of mum release, you know, that bit of, you know, hang on a minute, this is what I used to do with my mum maybe, you know. It's like you get that talking, and you know you're not alone. I've had a few mates that I've lost to suicide over the years for various reasons, and you know, they've gone through bad times, and I was the last person to speak to a guy I knew before he committed suicide. He literally spoke to me, and an hour later went off and killed himself. And I actually strongly believe that if we'd had groups like Menfulness 10 years ago, I'd still have 2 mates who would still be alive.
Gets easier. We never forget, because our mothers brought us into this world. You know, your mother would want you to enjoy your life. Enjoy it. Always know that your mother loves you. You know, and if your mother is still here, you know, and she's still alive, give her a hug, but tell her you love her every single day of the week.
I guess I want to say thank you to the guys that gave their time and shared their stories. There's also a shout out to Ross Shipley, who did the artwork for this. There's Danny Sewell, who's done a bit of music for this. A very big thank you to Sam Watling, who is one of the founders and one of the trustees of Menfulness. He's been so supportive and helped me out literally with equipment, with his time, with his advice, with his support, with his encouragement. So a big thank you to Sam. If you'd like to know more about Menfulness, then just type York Menfulness into any social media platform. You can also find us on Meetup. And yeah, thanks for listening, really. Thanks for taking the time. It means a lot to me, and I'm sure the lads. Right.